what journalism taught me that applies to the work that we do here is that an editor for a newspaper has to sit down every day and say, why should this story go on the front page of our newspaper, as opposed to the millions of other stories that we could put on the front page of our newspaper? What about this one makes it worth telling in this way? I understand people don't want to be glib about these things, but to me it does a disservice to the people who actually went through that stuff to not acknowledge that they found joy. All of our ancestors were strong people. That's why we're here. Even on plantations, they were finding ways to make music and celebrate and fall in love and have children and make art and write and sing. Like all of these things that keep human beings going was happening there. And so I think that a lot of art is like, well, we can't show them laughing on a plantation. That's dangerous. And it's like, no, that to me is sort of like empathetic, and that to me is what we should be doing. To take on these serious subjects and be self-serious about them, and not sort of find ways to laugh about them, and not find ways to like let your characters find some joy. That to me is actually, I think it doesn't acknowledge the strength of the people who went through those things. Race is very sort of like perfect for ridicule because it sort of exists in this place where race is both real and not real, right? And so sort of the vast majority of scientists will tell you that there is no basis for race in biology, that in fact we are all, the Human Genome Project has shown that we are like all 99.9% similar, that sort of like the differences in our DNA and the differences in our hair texture and nose width and whatever, like actually have no bearing on our sort of humanity, and our commonality sort of far supersedes all that other stuff. And so on the one hand, we understand like this is not real. And yet on the other hand, we have constructed our societies and our institutions with the idea that it is real. And so racism is real, but race is not real, right? And so there's that inherent absurdity there between those two things, and that to me sort of makes it ripe for laughing at. You see there, it's like silly to say that, the same things that people say about black kids when they sort of like act up. It's like, well, it's the rap music, and it's it's because they're not their parents. They're sort of like different. What happens when you say like white kids are doing this because they listen to punk rock and sort of like our anti-authoritarian music? And I just feel like it's impossible for me nowadays to talk about race without mocking it, because it is mockable. It is not. It's it's ridiculous.
I was going to ask if you had ever experienced what Monk goes through in the movie, and it sounds like you did.
3 months before I found the novel that I adapted, Erasure, I had sent in a script to some executives. Their notes came back through an emissary, through my manager, and one of their notes was that I needed to make the lead character, who's black, I needed to make him blacker. I told my manager, I said, I will indulge this note as long as whoever gave it is willing to sit across from me and tell me what it means to be blacker. Tell me how to make somebody blacker, and I will consider that. And of course, that note went away because nobody was willing to do that, right? Nobody was sort of like willing to. They probably knew that they were going to like face a civil rights lawsuit if they had that conversation. I have a really good friend who's a black woman journalist, and she came out. She went to a meeting with some producers, and one of the producers said, like, what are you interested in writing? And she said, I'm a child of the 90s. I really am interested in writing erotic thrillers. I'm really interested in rom-coms. I'd love to write rom-coms. And they said, okay, interesting. Let us go think, and we'll get back to you. And then they called her about 4 hours later, and they said, we've got the perfect project for you. The working title is Blind Tom, and it's about a blind slave who, thanks to a wealthy white benefactor, learns to play the piano and becomes a piano prodigy. And she was like, that doesn't sound like an erotic thriller, but
or
weird,
a rom-com.
Weird rom-com. Yeah. She and I laughed about it, but the sort of like implication of that is, why would we want a rom-com from you? Like, we have people for that, and they don't look like you. Like, what you are good for is the slave stuff, and the cross-burning stuff, and the crack stuff, and the inner city stuff. It's like, why would we why would we come to you for a rom-com? That you are so different, that sort of like the things that you are interested in, things that you find funny, your life, your emotions, it's different from mine, significantly. So significantly that like I can't imagine a world in which you write something that's not about this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that is sort of like the thing that I just have always tried to push back against and say like, we're just human beings. I made sure to put in like in some scenes like Monk lying. So for instance, like Monk's mother asked him at the beginning of the movie, like, you've gained weight, like what's wrong, you look fat, and he says, well, I haven't been sleeping lately, you know, and I've fallen off my exercise routine. And then then after the sister dies, Monk and Cliff are talking in the room, and Cliff says, have you been having trouble? He asked for some sleeping medication, and he says, have you been having trouble sleeping? And Monk says, no, I normally sleep fine, but you know, after seeing Lisa die, I'm having trouble sleeping. And it's like a subtle thing, but you see the way that he lies to people in his life in order to project the kind of image that he wants to project, right? And sort of like get by. And so he lies, he tells his mother one thing because he wants his mother to see him in one way and he wants his brother to see him in a different way. There's a scene where he says like, you're a doctor, and he's talking to his sister and she says, so are you? And he says, well, not that kind. And then he's talking to his brother, and his brother says, and he says like, well, I'm a doctor too. And his brother says like, sure, like you're not the right kind of doctor. But it shows you just sort of like, this is a person who sort of like, he has different relationships with different people, and the things that he says and the things that he does in relation to the different people in his life speak to his character and who he is and what he wants to represent when he sort of like is engaging with different people in his life. And so I think that sort of finding those things, like really understanding like, who is this person? Is he a liar? And if he's a liar, then make him a liar, you know, and sort of like make him lie in the ways that liars lie, which is just subtly and sort of like casually and just like, yeah, I'm telling a lie right now and I'm not really thinking about it, you know? I just think that is really sort of the key, I think, always for me is just you really, really, really need to know who these people are. And from there, sort of like, you'll sort of like, it's a wellspring of information about them. And it's like, okay, so I know who this person is, I know what their tics are, and their flaws and their aspirations and their relationships with the people around them. That sort of really guides everything else for me. And we had Jeffrey attached by then. And we met with every distributor in town. We met with every streamer, every big studio, and it was the most effusive praise I'd ever heard about anything that I'd worked on ever. People were like, this is one of the best scripts I've read in years. Oh my God, oh, Jeffrey Wright, he's a legend. He's one of our greatest living actors. Like, oh, amazing. Like, people were going crazy. And then it was like, great. Can we get money for the distribution? And it was like, oh, well, well, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. It's good luck. It's a little risky for us. This movie cost significantly less than $10 million. We shot it in 26 days. The people who were telling me this regularly make $150 million movies. Regularly, right? 20, 30 times the budget of what this movie cost. And I found somebody who took a chance. Her name's Alana Mayo, and she's, I think, one of, if not the only, black woman with green light power in Hollywood right now. She's the only black woman who can greenlight movies and say we are going to make this. Look, I'm not saying correlation does not equal causation. I'm not saying because Alana's black, she bought the movie, but I don't think it hurt. I think that she was more willing to take a risk. And like, for whatever reason, this industry has decided that it's a more of an acceptable risk to make a $200 million movie than a $5 million movie. I have no idea why that's a more acceptable risk. To me, it's like, why not make 40 $5 million risks?
Yeah.
To bring in marginalized voices, by definition, requires you to take a risk. Because the reason those voices are marginalized is because they have not been able to be centered to show you what they can do. You like my friend Justin, who said, like, I've written a red script before.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And why does Justin do that? Not because he's a bad guy and wants to put bad stuff into the world. He does it because he has a wife and a child, and he wants to make a living as a writer. And the more that you sell, the bigger your reputation grows. And sort of like it's a career decision and a business decision, right? The more important question, and the one that we should always ask, is why are the people atop these institutions, why are the people with their hands on the purse strings, why are they so interested in telling the same story over and over and over again? Why is that appealing to them, to tell a slave story again? Why is it appealing to them to tell a black gang member story again? Mothers, single mothers with 5 kids, like why is that the way that they prefer to see black life? Why is that the way that they prefer to see Mexican life? Why is that the way they prefer to see Asian life?
Yeah.
And I think it's important, that was an important conversation for me to have in the film.